to do this. And I love that. And I'm really excited to hear more about your story. And I'm just really thrilled to have like a full room here. And I think you should come up now. Cool. Yeah.
All right. Hey, Jim.
I wasn't nervous until I seen this thing come out.
I know. Thank you.
20 to 30.
Yeah, you bet. I was just warned about 20 to 30. I was the one that wanted a timer for our home group, and I was the only one that kept getting timed out. My name is Jim, and I'm an alcoholic. I think it's important when I share my experience, strength, and hope, and that I give you a bit of my history. And I'm not going to give you a 2-hour drunk-a-log or anything, but I'm going to tell you where I come from and how I ended up here. I was born in Campbell River. I'm the eldest of 6 children, and I was the nightmare son. I started drinking at an early age. I've totaled off a number of cars. I thought I just had bad luck, but I just, every time I drank, things seemed to happen. The first 2 guys that I drank with real seriously, one of them died in a car accident on Galarno when we were 16 years old, and the other one died in the streets in Vancouver in our early 20s. He was a paranoid schizophrenic with suicidal tendencies. And over the course of the years, I've known 287-4313. That's the number for Alcoholics Anonymous in Campbell River. I've known that number for probably 40 years. Number hasn't changed, but I never did call it. I thought when I drank that I worked hard, I had a lot of responsibility, and I deserved it. I drank alcoholically from when I first started drinking. I drank to get drunk. But back in the day, I used to go out and I would ski and I would golf and I would dive and I would play baseball and I would do all these things and drink. And then over the course of the years, I also did drugs. I did lots of cocaine and smoked pot, did every other thing that you could think of out there. But what happened is at some stage or some point in my life, I crossed over this line, this invisible line of no return. And I tried I'm 61 years old. I've been sober for 14 years, 7 months, and 15 days now. And I came into the program and I didn't go back out, but I came in with my wife. And when I came in, just prior to that, I tried quitting drinking thousands of times. And then every time I would have this, after a few days, my wife would start talking to me again. And then I wasn't violent. I was a happy drunk, but I was just haywire. I'd just drink until there was nothing left. And once I got to that point, I just made that transition. I used to write down in a day book. I'm self-employed. I used to write down in my day book, JML. It was a JML day. And I knew what that meant. That was a day that I was too hungover to go to work. And 20 years before I quit drinking was one every 2 months or something. I'd have a JML day. Then the progression of my alcoholism, it was at the end there. It was a couple times a week. But what I did was I would go in, get the crew going in the morning. I had up to 30 guys working for me at certain times. And I would go in the morning, I'd be shaking. I'd get up every morning, I would puke blood, and I would be all stressed out. I couldn't sleep. And I did that for years. Got to a point, I got sick. Oh no, Vicky and I, we had this great idea. Vicky's my wife. She passed away 5 months ago. And we had this idea that every time we drank, we did cocaine. And so I wanted to quit snorting cocaine. So Vicky found a drug and alcohol counselor. So we went to the drug and alcohol counselor, told him what our story was. We're fine drinking. We just want to quit doing coke when we're drinking. And the guy goes, "Don't you think your problem could be drinking?" And I said, "This guy's a fucking idiot. Let's go." And we left. And that was the insanity of it, right? And then I went in and I was having some, like I said, every morning I was sick and I would puke blood, and I went to the doctor and he ran a bunch of tests and I got a physical and all the blood work done. I got a phone call 2 days later, get in here right away. And I thought it was bad news. So I I went to, so what did I do? If I'm going to hear bad news, I might as well go out for one last bash. I went out, got another big bag of white stuff, stayed up all night, drank all night, went to the doctor the next day, and he said, Jim, if you keep going the way you're going, I guarantee you're going to have a stroke or a heart attack within 3 to 6 months. I guarantee it. So what did I do then? Went out again. And then that night, the next day, I was sitting out on my back deck and just having a smoke, and I was shaking. And that was when I hit my bottom. I never knew what a bottom was. I'd never tried AA before. But I knew in my mind, I could not tell myself one more time that I could get it under control. Before it was, I could, as long as people forgive me and forgot about it, I remembered where my car was and things would start coming back to me within a week. But I knew at that moment that I couldn't tell myself one more time that I could get it under control, and I surrendered. And I didn't even know what that was or what that meant at the time. So I walked into, Vicky had a girl that was going to meet us at the Alano Club, and she never showed up. So I was sitting in the car, and she didn't show up. Well, looks like we'll try another time. She goes, no, we're going in right now. So I always said Vicky had 6 more feet of sobriety than I did, but she walked in that first meeting at the Alano Club 6 feet ahead of me. And when I went in there, I sat right by it's in the big part of the club now. Back in the day when I come there, it's in the small room in the back. I sat right by the door because if I didn't like it, I'm not shy. I'm just going to get up and leave. But after that first meeting, I felt something in that room, and it was powerful. And I knew at the time that once I heard the stories, it was like, holy smokes, I'm in the right place. And I think it was my second meeting I got asked to share, so I shared. There was this guy called Yukon Bob, and for those of you that knew Yukon Bob was a ex-Navy SEAL, and he'd been injured. He fell off a machine up north and broke his back. He hobbled around in a cane, and he was a real hard-ass, straightforward guy. And he said to me when I shared, he said, you newcomers should shut your mouth and open your ears. So after the meeting, I went outside the meeting and told him to go fuck himself, and I didn't. And that's how it started off. But what happened there was I realized that I needed somebody like that. I needed somebody that wasn't going to sugarcoat things, that was going to tell me what he thought. And I was the only guy. He sponsored one other guy at the time. He said, normally I don't have more than one sponsee, but I'll take you on. And him and I used to take time together. I did the first set of steps with him. Him and I would go in a little Jeep. We'd go riding up the back roads, and he would tell me his stories. And he was a big instrumental part of sharing his experience and strength and hope with me. And then once I learned his story of what happened to him, he was an avid outdoor guy, a longbow hunter, and his life was the outdoors. He fell off a machine, he broke his back, and he was unable to do any of that stuff, but he stayed sober through all that. And I knew that's the kind of guy that I need. So he was my sponsor for 3 or 4 years until he passed away. And I came to learn about coming into AA. I had no idea what being an alcoholic was. And when I learned by first set of steps I did with Yukon Bob was through the big book. And the first thing he said to me was, get a big book, read the doctor's opinion. And that's what I did. And I learned that alcoholism wasn't due to having a weak will or not being stubborn enough to power through it, which I tried thousands of times. I learned that it was a mental obsession. And then once you picked up that first drink, the phenomena, craving kicked in. And I was powerless how much I drank after that fact. And that's what happened. Once I learned that, I've never gone out and found the need to convince non-alcoholics of that it's a disease concept. I don't care whether or not they think it is or don't think it is. I don't care about that. But I knew in my mind, when I got to that point that left to my own devices, I was doomed. Sheer willpower was not enough for me. And I believed in God from as far back as I can remember. So once I crossed that invisible line of no return, come into the rooms at AA, heard something in there, then I started working the program to the best of my ability. And I was at the point in my life where things were going pretty good. And then what happened is life comes at you, and the good and the bad. And sometimes there's a lot more serious things that come at certain people. And I know I was sober for 2 years, my Uncle John got cancer, and I was the guy that took him to all his appointments until he passed away. And then, we got to, I was able, one of the most important gifts that Alcoholics Anonymous has given me is the ability to be the man that God wants me to be. Because before, what would happen in times of strife, when things were going bad, what I would do is I'd go out and get loaded. I've been able to be there for a lot of people during the course of my sobriety, and I know, but it hasn't all been good. I've gotten in. The funny thing about AA is the worst thing that happens in your life is being a drug addict and an alcoholic and fucking your life up and going through these shitty things and having guilt and remorse and hiding behind closed doors and locking the door and all sketched out looking who's coming out. Was that somebody coming to the house? I don't have to do that. My daughter, she was 9 when I sobered up. She used to know what the drug dealer's name was. Oh, Dad, Don's here. And now, I just think how sick that is. But what has happened with it is I've gone through a lot of real heavy stuff over these course of these years. And I know with it is I've realized through surrendering to it, that surrendering to my high power, my intellect and my perseverance is not enough. I have to surrender to God, which I've done. And by doing that, I've had to come to accepting the fact that I'm an alcoholic and what alcoholism is, and accepting the fact that I'm powerless over people, places, and things, and and that I'm not able to control everything that I thought I could control prior to that. That everything, it says in 4:17 in the big book, that everything is in the world is exactly the way as it's supposed to be today. And I used to kind of buck that, but I understand now that what it is how things happen in life. At times, things aren't fair. But because of what's happened in my life recently, is I've gone through a really hard, dark storm, and it's been going on for 7 years. 7 years ago, my wife got breast cancer. She had a double mastectomy from breast cancer, and I was her primary caregiver for all that time. In 2022, there was 36 cancer appointments, and that was just checking for cancer. And then eventually the cancer came back, and it came back in the form of, it came back in her chest, and it come back. She got 4 brain tumors in her brain, like in her head. And when that was happening, I didn't know how I was going to come about this one, but it's time. What has happened is we were in the hospital when Vicky got her brain tumors. We went on a motorcycle ride in 2022. We did an 8,500 kilometer trip. We went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin to a friend that was taking a 50-year cake. She started getting these weird headaches and things were different. When we came back, they found out that we'd been in that hospital hundreds of times. And this time when the nurse came, oh, you got to come into this room, I knew it was up. And when we come back in the room, they found something on the CT scan, and it turned out, they said it was 2 tumors, and it turned out to be 3, then it was 4. They were growing rapidly, and we took the kids to Disneyland and the grandkids to Disneyland, and we come back. They gave her maybe up to 2 years. But when all that was going on, she went to the hospital for 12 days. I stayed in there for 10 of those days. Then she was out for a week. And then she'd come back in for 5 days. Well, 5 days before she died, she had this really bad nightmare. And she woke up, she was screaming. And she did a step 9 with me. And she told me a very deep betrayal by her and a number of others to me. And it shocked me because I was there for my wife. I would have died for her. 5 days after that, back in the hospital, she was out for a day and a half. That night, get her taken by ambulance to the hospital. She died in my arms at 7:30 in the morning. and I felt the exact moment that her soul left her body. It went up and out. I knew the exact moment that it happened. And then when that happened, it was we planned the service and all that stuff. 4 days after that, my daughter comes to me. We had a biological daughter together, Caitlin. She just turned 24 on September the 5th. She goes, "Dad, I got to talk to you." Jason's my stepson. I have 2 stepsons. He's the youngest. He goes, Mom had a gambling problem, a serious gambling problem. So I found out, major betrayal. 5 days later, dies. 4 days after that, I found out that my wife spent hundreds of thousands of dollars gambling. And the total amount is a lot. I don't even want to say how much it is. So here I am at that stage. When she passed away, an hour and a half after she died, I went to a meeting because I needed a meeting. And you want to talk about surrender, and you want to talk about being in a total dark pit of I didn't know. I just couldn't believe that this woman that I'd been with, that when she got cancer, I got down on my hands and knees and prayed that God take it from her and give it to me, because she'd lived a very traumatic life. She went through a lot of abuse, seen a lot of really nasty stuff, and I didn't see that. I was raised by a loving family. I was raised in a loving family. So when I seen that, when that happened, I do eulogies for people that I love, and I was doing her eulogy. So we had the service booked, and we, with the service, I had to go in, and we canceled everything because we were just shocked. All the family found all this stuff out, and it was a shock to all of us. None of us seen it. But what had happened at that point was I needed AA more than I ever have in my life. And some of the worst things that ever happened in my life has been going through what I've been going through for the last 7 years. But when they say you don't know what's good for you, I did not know what was good for me. But because of these trials and tribulations that I've experienced, and I'm experiencing, I'm still in the middle of the storm. It's not done yet. It's in the process of that, but at least I can see the other side of the storm now. And but what it did for me is it totally made me surrender. And I have some close friends that are very close with me. And I went to church. Vicky and I went to church with one of them because this pastor I know, he's a building inspector, said, if you're ever doing a sermon, I want to go. So I ended up going. The 3 of us went to the Christian church, and I heard something in there because AA just wasn't enough for me. But because of the spirituality that I had to dig so deep, not to walk into the dark, I wanted to walk into the light, and I was just so morally just beaten. And the depth of betrayal that I've experienced in this last 5 months has just been unbelievable. It's so dark. But I know it caused me surrender to God even more. 9 days after she passed on April the 7th on Good Friday, not that Sunday, but the next Sunday. I woke up in the morning, and for the first time ever, I had this thought. And the thought was, I woke up, and the first thing I thought is, I want to go to church. Never had that thought in my life. So I went in, and I grabbed my phone, looked at it. There's a message from my buddy that it was Brett, and he asked me, Jim, would you like to come to church with me and my family this morning? I'd never had that thought about going to church ever in my life. And it was like a real sign. So I went to church, I got baptized. And through these things that I'm going through, when it says trust in God and this too shall pass and all that stuff, I got beat down to such a dark place that all I had at that time was to surrender. And now I know that I don't know where all this is going to fall, but all I know is when I lay my head down at the end of the day and I have conscious contact with God all day, I know I've done all I can do for that day, and I trust in God that this too shall pass, and one day the storm will end, and I got to keep moving on. And so some of the worst things in my life has caused me to become the man that God wants me to be, and have such a great appreciation for life, greater than I ever have had, because I lived with somebody for 7 days or 7 years that we did not know how many more days that she had. And we knew that when people say, when you're living, and I pray there's nobody here with terminal illness, but when you're living with somebody with terminal illness and you don't know if they're going to wake up in the morning, it gives you such a great appreciation for this gift that we have, which is our life. And it makes you want to do everything you can with every day that you have and make the most of it. That's why sitting in a room of like-minded people like us on a Friday night, when we'd probably know what else we'd be doing if we weren't in here and we were still out using, we would be, it definitely wouldn't be 30 alcoholics listening to one guy talk. And the thing about that is I'm truly grateful for all this stuff that I've gone through and in the process of going through, because it's made me humble to God more than I ever have in my life. And I've got some direction in my life today because of that fact. And I'm grateful for that. And, with it is by going through the course of my sobriety, because of these things that I've been going through in my life, is I had so deep-seated of resentment against, not particularly this last one, but prior to that, a couple years ago, Yukon Bob used to say, when people did things to me that I had when I was doing my first set of steps, when people did things that harmed me and my family, what is my part in that? How is that a defect of character to me? How that is a defect of character is, like Angie said, is you keep watering it, you're keeping it alive, and you're giving people, places, and things the ability to affect how I think and feel, and nobody has that right to make me feel bad. When I feel bad, it's not anybody's actions, it's me, how I'm dealing with it. So in the big book, it says with a deep-seated resentment, what they suggest to do is you pray for them. You pray that they get out of life what you want out of life. I pray that they have peace, love, and serenity, health for their family and friends. And may they be the person that they're supposed to be, and have total gratitude for this gift of life that we all have today. And I do that every time. Then eventually what happens with that mindset is love is a mutually exclusive to any other emotion. And to me, God is love. So when I get a bad, sour thought about the things I'm dealing with now, or prior things, when they pop up, is I pray that they get out of life what I want out of life. So when I flip that script, and love can't coexist with hate, fear, and resentment. So once I do that mind flip, and then I can actually feel love for them. And I have the ability to forgive and have true forgiveness. And true forgiveness forgets. When I go, somebody does a step 9 with me, or I do one with them, when I go through that process of forgiveness, it doesn't mean I forget it. And sometimes I have to have forgiveness on a daily basis, or numerous times every day, and replace that fear and resentment and anxiety with love. And it makes me be the man that God wants me to be. And that was a tough one for me. That took a real long time. Because when I first come in and surrendered to God to do for me what I couldn't do for myself in relationship, to remove the urge to use mind-altering substance, it was miraculously removed from me. But it took like over 13 years for me to surrender the rest of my life to that. So here I am today, after going through all these things, and really serious things, by the actions of others, being put into that position. But I don't think I have forgiveness for those involved. I had loved my wife. I would have died for her. And I know when I did the eulogy, there's over 500 people. And to wrap my mind on how I could do that after facing that betrayal, was I had to say it through my eyes. And that's the only way that I can look at life today. I can't look at it, what did people do to me or think of me, is none of my business. But what I can do as a human being is wake up every morning, thank God for another day, and go through that day trying to be the best human being I can be. And if I do something I feel uncomfortable with, make an amends, and get on with my life. And at the end of the night, go to bed, thank God for another day, and wake up and do it again. So I truly am grateful for the ability to be here and speak this evening. I've been wrestling with this. I've talked to a number of people about bringing this stuff up, but it's when people say to me at a meeting, "Oh, Jim, how are you doing? How's, it just brings it all back to me, and I just don't want to hear it anymore." And it's not, my wife she took a lot of girls through the steps, and she was, I believe that she tried to be the best person that she could be, but because of all the trauma and stuff that she went through her life, and her mom drank when she was pregnant with her, I will never have an answer why, but I know that there was something broken inside of my wife, and I loved her. And the thing about it, facing all these repercussions because of it, my program's stronger than it's ever been. I have more love and compassion in me than I've ever had. I got baptized in the church. My connection to God is stronger than it's ever been. So some of the worst things in my life that's happened has been the best things in my life that has happened. So do I know how the big fella works things out? I don't have a clue. But all I know is I'm grateful that I'm here and that I'm sober. And I know, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. I've strayed from the path and I've become a dry drunk. I never have picked up, but today, because of my experience, strength, and hope, because of the connection that I have to God, and because of each and every one of us here, we all had to surrender to that fact too. And the collective spirituality that we share in this room together is where I need to get my strength from. So I'm grateful that I never thought I would say it, but I truly am a grateful alcoholic today. And that's it. Thanks for asking me to share.